Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman Mulvaney, welcome. First, I want to associate myself with the comments of Senator Corker and yourself on OCO. OCO is too easy, and it's really not an honest way to deal with the defense budget, which has real needs, but it shouldn't be done through the borrowing and not paying for it. Also, I completely share your view that the debt and the deficit are a grave issue facing this country. My particular concern is about interest rates. Interest rates, as you know, are at a historic low right now, and it's pretty easy to calculate for every 1% that interest rates go up, we're out now $200 billion. And that can very rapidly eat up almost the entire current discretionary budget in a hurry, just by forces of which we have no control. So absolutely right to be concerned about that. Let me talk a bit about the issue of management. The title of your job is the Office of Management and Budget. Most of today has been talking about budget. The chairman at the beginning talked about overpayments in the federal government, something like $144 billion. Another piece of that is under collection of revenues by the IRS, which is estimated as high as $500 to $600 billion. Most of us pay our taxes that are owed. Some people don't. Those who don't aren't paying their fair share. If you put those two together, $600 billion a year that would eliminate the current deficit just through better management. Now, the problem is it's going to take more people to provide that management. You can't expect the IRS to improve their collection with fewer people. So I hope that you'll take seriously these opportunities, but you can't move in two directions at once by reducing the federal workforce and still expecting more results in terms of monitoring overpayments or collecting more efficiently through the IRS.
I do. I recognize that, and it's an excellent point, Senator. I would encourage you at the same time to consider that another way to increase collections without having to hire more people is to have a simpler tax code. And that one of the reasons, there are people who choose not to pay. They're devious. They don't want to follow the law. They get all that. But there's a lot of folks who don't pay just because it's really, really hard to do. And it might make it actually easier to collect if we had a tax code that was easier for folks to comply with.
I remember once when I worked here many years ago, there was a proposal that members of Congress should have to prepare their own tax returns. That might solve a lot of these complexity problems. Should tax cuts be revenue neutral?
If I have a chance to sit and talk to the President about this, I would encourage him to look first and foremost on the effects of the overall economy, on the effects of growth of any tax cuts. Because as I've mentioned here a couple times today, given the political situation we face in this country, I think the best chance you have to reduce the deficit or balance the budget is to accomplish economic growth.
I would agree with
be the first.
I would agree with that, but there's this theology out there that lowering taxes equals greater economic growth. I have tried seriously to find economic studies that substantiate that. I haven't been able to find them. For the record, I would appreciate your supplying whatever data you have or studies that have indicated that that's the case. The Bush tax cuts in the middle of the last decade did not have that effect. My understanding of the experiment going on in Kansas is that it has not had that effect. So I think we need to be careful with a cavalier assumption that tax cuts will indeed stimulate growth and therefore be self-funding. That's an idea that kicks around here, but I don't think there's much data to support it. And the problem is, if it doesn't work, you've only dug the hole deeper. And if you add the proposed tax cuts, $450, $500 billion a year to increase defense spending to the current deficit, you're talking about $1 trillion a year further deficits.
And I would like, Senator, for you to share that information as well. My commitment to you in the opening statement stands. In fact, it's how I look at the job very seriously, which is I want to take a fact-based approach when advising the President. So if there's data that you'd like me to see on that point, I'd welcome it.
Well, and on the question of tax cuts, I had a friend, a guy in a hardware store clerk, tell me that there's no such thing as a tax cut when you're in a deficit situation, because if you cut taxes and borrow the money to fill the hole, all you're really doing is shifting those taxes to your kids. And I think that's an important point. So we have to be really careful about this. that we not simply give ourselves a tax cut and then lay it on our kids who are going to have to eventually pay it with interest.
It is amazing sometimes how much sage advice you can get in rural hardware stores. I've had the same experience.
Particularly in Maine.
Yeah. I like the ones in South Carolina, but I take you at your word.
Final quick question. We've been some discussion about the debt ceiling, and you voted against it, and you feel this is an opportunity for conversation. Will you counsel the president that violating the debt ceiling is not a big deal?
I will counsel the president as to the ramifications of raising the debt ceiling and of not raising the debt ceiling. I feel like I have a grasp of both sides of that issue and look forward to conveying all of the arguments to him so that he can make the best decision possible.
I hope
and
you
then
will
I will defend his position.
I hope you will take that very seriously, because I have never seen any particular data or studies that indicates that violating the debt ceiling would be good for the American economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Congressman Mulvaney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.